Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to our first executive committee meeting for this new year. Oh, please rise. I expect you to. Where is it? Like, there it is. If it wasn't here, we'd face east. Would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And everyone may be seated. Thank you again for attending. I have to communicate some regrets for everyone here. There are 11 members that comprise the executive committee, which meets in between meetings of the quarterly full commission meetings. We only have 5 here, and that means we don't have a quorum to do business. So what we'll do is we're going to proceed with the agenda and we'll make it informational only. In the event that we attain a quorum before we're done, we'll have anything that requires action taken up. But it's very likely that this will have to be taken up at the next meeting, and that's just how it goes sometimes. So, Mary Thorne, in the event that somebody does show up, you should take the usual minutes. But if somebody doesn't show up in time, the minutes will reflect that we met this morning, who was here, and that we had no quorum to do business, and that's it. You don't even have to take all of the detail. So, welcome, everyone. And just a reminder, although it seems moot or not as relevant because we don't have a quorum to do business this morning, we always encourage all the members of the commission to attend these meetings. But this meeting was styled as an executive committee meeting, and so only members of that committee are able to participate in the actual action. That is to say, to introduce a motion, second it, and participate in the formal action of the group. But we welcome everyone to be here this morning, and I extend our welcome again for everyone. So, I'm going to recognize the attorney, David Hollenbeck, who will offer a report with regard to appointments to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 3 communications from appointing authorities. As you'll recall, members of the full commission serve at the pleasure of their appointing authority, and they remain so designated until we hear otherwise from the appointing authorities. We have 3 such communications this morning. Porter County Council has communicated with NERC indicating that Jeff Larson, who is actually the president of the Porter County Council now, will be their designee to NERC. The town of St. John communicates with us that Christian Jorgensen, who is a town council member, will be their new designee to the NERC Commission. And finally, the Board of Commissioners of LaPorte County have communicated with us indicating that Richard Morzinski, Jr., is their new designee, and he is in fact the president of the Board of Commissioners of LaPorte County. So again, simply by way of information, these appointments are in proper order and form, and we have 3 new members of the full commission.
Mr. Hollenbeck, thank you very much. I know that staff will take the steps to make sure that they're given all the notices of regular membership, and perhaps the website will be updated to reflect their membership. You have before you the minutes of the meeting of January 19, 2016, the full commission meeting. That is there for your reading, and we will take that up in the event that we get a quorum this morning. In the event not, that will be a matter for the full commission. It is now the moment in the agenda for me to offer a report. I do want to call everybody's attention to a matter that would be in the packets, and I hope even members of the commission that aren't members of the executive committee are here to take a look at it. There'll be no action on this today, and I'm hopeful that unless there is a desire by the full executive board to take action today, that we would wait until the full commission met. To remind everyone, Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission serves a number of functions. The function is probably most preeminent and is the one that we've had the longest since our inception, now that we're in our 51st year, is being the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's an entity that is identified in federal legislation that has the responsibility of helping allocate fairly and through empirical basis the monies that are available for transportation projects in our region. It also has been identified since 2003, as a council of governments. That's an unusual designation for us. It's not something that every one of the metropolitan planning organizations in Indiana enjoys, and we have it. And from time to time, we actually take steps like that. In the restructuring of our committee bodies that help us do the heavy lifting of the full commission, that was taken into account. So some of the bodies that we've created as bodies that serve the fuller purposes of the commission, like the legislative committee, for example, that is a committee that we believe is reflective of our identity as a council of governments. From time to time, we also want to express our opinion as one, meaning this is a body of elected officials that represent 52 different jurisdictions, and we think that that ought to matter to the legislature. And so from time, or to other people who have a position that we think has public import on a matter of, as I've described in this, a great pith and moment, which comes from Shakespeare, by the way. So I would like you to review a resolution. This resolution, I want to thank the staff for its initial draft on this. They did great work, and I especially appreciate their industry on it. It is much better than a resolution like this, if it is to be passed, be done so by the full commission, but I wanted to inform the executive board about it. And this was actually generated in response to a conversation that took place under good of the order, where Commissioner McDermott and others spoke about their disappointment in what seems to be a very protracted period or process in getting the Klein Avenue Bridge to be reconstructed. As you may well know, it is also a matter of our concern because it is included in our transportation improvement plan. So it is part of our larger 2040 plan as part of that. And in consequence of that, we felt like there's been a lot of effort, but it still goes on not being remedied. So this resolution really is a sense of the commission piece. It's like our opinion. And hopefully it will reflect adequately what the entire commission feels is saying. The ultimate goal of this is to simply say we would like this expedited. We would share this with our governor, leadership in the Indiana Department of Transportation, and as it reads, such other persons as may be deemed to have an interest in this matter, and will encourage those persons to carry out the object and purposes of this sensitive commission resolution. So our opinion is we hope this goes faster, and hopefully when this is received, there'll be some response from the recipients, and hopefully that will help some movement. But there would be no request, even with the quorum. It would not be my hope that we would take any action on it today. It doesn't seem appropriate for the Executive Commission to take that up. It really needs to be a full commission matter. But I commend it to you for your reading, and the hopes as a full commission we can take action on that.
Mr. Chair, that would probably be not in the next meeting.
That's right.
That's executive as well,
Right.
just to clarify.
Thank you. And that won't be until, I believe, April will be our next standing meeting of the full commission. I just have one other matter that I wanted to raise under my reports, and I'm going to start with an apology. It has been customary for us to send out solicitations to ask the membership about their interest in either continuing to serve where they're serving now on the various committees that we have, or their interest in serving on new ones. And that's especially important for our newest members. We're going to do that, and I apologize to you for my hand in that. What I hope, though, is, for the most part, in the absence of a communication to the contrary by the current membership, with the exception of the TPC, the Technical Planning Committee, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to have the people who are serving currently on the commissions and bodies that they've been identified for will be willing to continue in that. So my sense is that I want to try that again for the purposes of continuity. However, in the course of our service last year, we got a lot of information about ways in which we could further improve or further perfect, which we should always be about, always continually improving. The way in which we compose the Technical Planning Committee. So we are going to, in part, send out that information. We're also going to take a look at the adequacy of representation from some of our bigger cities with regard to that body.
Hello?
But in the meantime, as it meets, people who are there already should continue to come. I've already made one appointment. I've asked Jim Tun to continue to join that body and serve. But we will be hopeful to get your responses as quickly as you can, and we'll do a better job of getting them out to you. But you have my apology about that it didn't go out earlier. And that concludes what I had to say from my report from the chair. So the next matter for us is to hear from our Executive Director, Ty Warner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jeff Benson and I just returned back yesterday from Washington, D.C. at the Conference of Regions from the National Association of Regional Councils, and spent the day yesterday meeting with our legislative folks. Also, Dave Schaefer and Lara Milo were also on that trip. They're still coming back today. And when we created this agenda, I had not realized that they wouldn't be back for this meeting this morning. So I can't get their input on their takeaways to have them share with you directly on the results of the meeting. But at least to give you some word that having come today, even if we don't have a quorum, I'll just go ahead and dive into at least some of the highlights that I took from that trip, and then if Mr. Benson wants to chime in and give a second opinion or augment anything, that'd be great. First of all, let me pass around what we took as our main thrust. We had, if you remember those journals, which I've got to point out, Christine Sitt has brought her official 50th anniversary NRC journal today to the meeting. Yeah. So kudos to her. So we prettied those up and had a nice thing, a summary about NRC within it, and then this insert that had our position. So that was our takeaway. I'm afraid I only have 2 copies of those, but feel free to steal it or pass it around or whatever you like. The fundamental issues on that takeaway are 2 things. One has been a continuing mantra of NRC, which has been for years now, making the case that we need a sustainable form of transportation funding when the FAST Act funding actually expires. So far, nobody has come around anything that would fill the gap that will be created once all the things that have been cobbled together to fund the current tax act expires. And not to go down into the weeds, but of course the most obvious one is an increase in the indexing of the gas tax. But as we've been told repeatedly in Washington, that is a non-starter for many people. Unfortunately, with that removed, there's very few options that folks have rallied around, except for possibly something along the lines of vehicle miles traveled, which several states are piloting. But that too has raised some privacy issues and whatnot, and requires some technology in some cases. Bottom line is that there's still no rally around a particular funding increase. That was one part of our message. The other part of our message, as we've discussed in this body before, had to do with the rescinding of the rule that was put in place by the United States Department of Transportation that went into effect literally on January 19th, the day before the inauguration, as from the outgoing Department of Transportation Secretary. That, long and short of it, required either an actual merging or functional merging with the MPOs within the urbanized area that we share with Chicago and with Milwaukee. So, not to put too much of an alarmist spin on this, but the upshot would be that our transportation improvement program, your projects that we bring forward from your communities, would essentially be subjected to a population of 10 million across that region. It would be subsumed within that. So we'd be fighting for those priorities among that larger population. We've discussed this before, but suffice it to say that CMAQ, which is the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and Sewer PAC, which is the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, we've been united from day one, the first time this rule was proposed, on what a bad idea this rule is. In fact, that rule received over 600 letters of opposition nationwide from nobody's in favor of this rule. Virtually no one. There was very few letters of anything close to support, but no one was in favor of it. Despite that, it was made a rule. So now the big challenge is to have that rule rescinded. And there are several ways that there may be accomplished, which we've been talking about while we've been in DC. I'd be glad to talk about that more if you'd like, but the issue is how to do it. We've heard basically universal agreement that everybody agrees this is one of the worst ideas to come out of the Department of Transportation. So it's just a matter of how, when this happens. So that was the second part of our main platform. Again, we met with Congressman Sklosky, Congresswoman Walorski. We were able to meet with Senator Todd Young and with Senator Donnelly, Joe Donnelly, and convey these issues. Again, we've received support for our position. It's just on the one issue for funding, nobody's rallied around a politically tenable solution. And on the MPO consolidation, it's just a matter of how we get that rescinded. But very, very good news. I will sum up, I think, maybe the main takeaways that affect you and your communities in funding of what we've heard from NARC. National Association of Regional Councils. Obviously, the Trump administration is still very new, so there's not a real clear sense of how things will be coming down the pipe yet, as they're still getting settled. That said, it's not as if the speakers that they had were in any way just pontificating or just giving opinions. It actually was very helpful framing of what to look for on down the pike. And the two things that the two different approaches that I'll mention, the thing to have a heads up about. The Trump administration had issued a 10-page white paper about transportation priorities. I think that it was actually during the campaign, if I'm not mistaken, but there's like a 10-page white paper, but it's just conceptual. Then the Democratic Party released a infrastructure plan which has priorities but does not identify actual sources of funding for those priorities. So there's still a lot to be determined in this picture. What we can gather from the white paper from the Trump administration, and as is pretty obvious from other comments that have been made, is that there will be a significant emphasis on public-private partnerships, trying to engage the private sector in financing, et cetera. One of the speakers, I think, gave a very, very helpful analogy, which was to, in his take of the difference between financing and funding. The analogy he used is, in financing, you are moving air to different parts of the balloon, and in funding, you are actually putting more air into the balloon. So one of the sort of heads up that was given from this is that many people on the panel, and again, this is just opinion, we'll see what happens, but many people on the various panels they had felt that no one should be too expectant of increased funding for transportation despite the emphasis on infrastructure placed by the new administration, that the push will primarily come from the area of financing. Others on the panel indicated that there's plenty of capital from private investments if there was insurance of how that capital could be invested in public infrastructure. But I'm just relaying that just to say this is the contours of what we're looking at for the new funding picture as we come to the end of the FAST Act and what's into the future. So that would be my main takeaway. There were other issues. I don't know, Mr. Benson, if you want to add anything or augment any of that.
To tag on to one of the things you said, we spent a great deal of time with Senator Todd Young, and my takeaway with that was that it looked like there might be a path for some Ds and Rs to get together for legislation to remove the order, the rule, and that was
occurred.
encouraging. The other thing is that there was seminars and other speakers that were very helpful. Since we can't deal with everything in Washington, there are other things. One was the legal challenges for your community, and with the Supreme Court nominations and speculation on what those are going to look like in important cases that will affect us. That was really interesting. The autonomous vehicles, the Atlanta Regional Council and some other councils have already incorporated autonomous vehicles in their long-range transportation plans, because it's going to affect us, everything from ordinances to how things that move around. And the following morning on the CBS News, they were talking about autonomous drones being used as cabs that start this summer in Dubai and are being tested in, I can't remember where it was, Nevada or something. So those are some long-range things to consider. The DC Water presentation was really incredible with the head of that, who we're trying to get him to come here for the conference on the environment in Michigan City in June to speak at that, because he was, the biggest takeaway from that was why do all these different sewer treatment and water facilities all around the country, each one has to reinvent the wheel for financing, for how to do this, and instead of being a collective body that can learn from each other. And that, because he has said some amazing things with limited resources, everything from marketing to funding, and ultimately improving the environment and water. But there was a number of really interesting things. Those were the big ones. Blair Milo chaired the Fleets for the Future, the Environmental Committee, and Dr. Nat Kendall Taylor gave a message on framing, which if we get the PowerPoint would be wonderful to help. with how you get your message across. They did done research with, how you sell your message and what works and what doesn't. And sometimes what you think works is the exact thing that doesn't. And an example is the Mythbusters things. He suggested don't ever put, this is false, this is true, because what they found in their research was that it reinforces the people thinking what is false. So they went back to them and found that many of them were positive that those false statements were now true, and they cited the document that they had shown them saying it's false as the proof that it's true. And so
They credit the organization that put out the
Right.
Mythbusters as the source of the false information.
his ultimate takeaway is never, ever, ever do, advertise what is false, to try to change that. And it is important for communities as you're trying to, engage, educate, enlighten, whatever. So those, and the other was the opioid epidemic, which was another thing that was covered.
I will pass this around, although this is not typically a NERC per se issue. Very germane and very interested. It's something of interest to the communities that were in attendance. And I didn't even cut you off, but just to say that I'll pass this around.
Yeah.
This is from the National League of Cities and National Association of Counties, and folks were very, very interested in this study. I'm sorry.
And so different regional councils around the country engage in different things. Some engage in the aging, some provide health services, like in Texas, for the indigents, some deal with the opioid. But it was a very interesting conference. And we're in a new hotel this year that's very close to the Capitol, very convenient. It's nice. That's it.
I will also pass around, he's got 2 copies of this, but this is the summation of NARCS as an organization, their policy positions that cover not just transportation, but also environment and economic development and public safety. And I will pass these around as well.
Are there any of these that we don't want? These
No.
policy positions? Okay.
I always try to be careful not to present things as a NERC position that the NERC Commission has not taken a formal position in, but let's put it this way, none of those positions have been are contrary to anything that NERC
Very
has
good.
taken a position.
That's good to hear. Do you have anything further for us anytime?
No, thank you very much. Oh, I do have just one. I don't know how many of you were able to catch the Undercover Boss episode. I just congratulate Mary Freeman Wilson. It was just phenomenal. If you hadn't had a chance to, I don't know if it's available online or something, but just fantastic. So well done.
The transformation was remarkable. I was astonished when I saw it.
Now everyone knows how silly I am.
No.
Yeah, it was a little.
Oh, I'm sorry, just one thing I just wanted to highlight again from the NARC. I just wanted to state again, because I think it's really fantastic that how much great representation we have from this commission on the NARC board. I just think it's worth re-emphasizing. Jeff Benson is currently serving as Senior Vice President of the NARC organization on the board. Dave Schaefer continues to be able to participate as past president, and Blair Milo is newly on the NARC board. And so it's just been phenomenal to have that kind of representation from NERC into the decision-making process and to be represented at the national level.
Also, people we can be proud of. That's nice. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve at that level, too.
And I'm sorry, just one more. This is the last one, I promise.
It's okay, just until you're done.
I just thought it's worth mentioning, as you've noticed the construction going on in the building, I thought I'd just mention that the Purdue, I think a lot of you know this already, but Purdue Northwest is who is taking occupancy of the space where the forum used to be located. Equidistant pretty much between the 2 campuses. So they'll largely be using that space for meeting space. I think I understand it's very skeletal. I think it's been one person from Purdue, but I understand the South Shore Leadership Center, who has a new partnership with Purdue, will be occupying that space. So again, until things are finalized, and I suppose anything could change, but theoretically, South Shore Leadership Center will be occupying that space that Purdue will be using for meetings in the building. And so at that point, you notice the roofing going on above our heads, which has been a little disruptive, but nice to have new roofing. This space will almost be finished being remodeling, and the intention in talking with the forum, and we'll talk with Purdue once they get in, is to have some sort of long overdue open house in this space once everything is finally completed. Thank you.
That's quite okay. Thank you, Tom. And if something else occurs to you, feel free. We're now at the next level of our agenda to recognize Karen Freeman Wilson, Mayor of the City of Gary and Venerable Treasurer of NERC for the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your confidence in allowing me to serve as treasurer this year. There are 3 items that are on the agenda that require your action, having with the Finance and Personnel Committee having met this morning at 8 a.m. We have listed or included the minutes from the January meeting in the packet, so I hope that you will review those at your leisure. But as it relates to the action items, the first item is the recommendations for procurement, and for those recommendations is an initiative for the Burns Waterway Watershed. It's a cost share program that's being done in partnership with IDEM, and essentially it's a 50-50 match program for those entities and actual individuals that would qualify in the watershed, and it's a certain geographic area. And NERC would provide $268,975 as a part of that 50-50 match. The second procurement recommendation involves 2 vehicles for the City of LaPorte, for LaPorte Transport rather, and that would be paid with FPA administration funds at 80%, and then the local community would pick up 20%, and that would be for an amount not to exceed $145,219. So is there, that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
And Madam Chair and staff, all 3 of these were matters for action, so I have a question. Is this time sensitive? Is this something that if we had to let it wait till the next month, it would not impair operations unduly? Or is it sincerely time sensitive?
That's, I was going to ask Dave, Attorney Hall, that question, because I know the City of LaPorte is anxious to get those 2 vehicles ordered, and I think there's some time sensitivity and also spending those grant funds.
Right.
Which is the procurement recommendation.
I think the dollars have to be spent in a 9-month period.
Well, I will not go further than Dave Hollenbeck will let us go, but I know it's a parliamentary matter. If we believe that there's a likelihood that this will be ratified, that we believe that there's not going to be any pushback from the full commission or the next executive board meeting where we believe we'll have a forum, I would not object to allowing a motion to allow this to go forward subject to ratification. But it isn't official unless it's ratified, and there is the risk that it wouldn't be ratified. You have to understand that. I'm only offering that if this is time sensitive. If it's not, I would prefer that we wait till the next executive committee meeting. Does anything I said make you anxious?
Mr. Chair, you've taken the words out of my mouth.
I did. I'm especially proud of that. So,
You've taken the words of a lawyer.
oh, I didn't mean to do that. It was parliamentary. You know.
Yes, the chair is accurate. We have a ratification statute in Indiana that would allow to happen exactly what he's indicating, and you also indicated properly, the only risk we're taking is that if it would not subsequently be ratified by the appropriate body.
Question for clarification. Again, how many, since only executive members, board members can vote, how many are we?
We're at 5.
We haven't been, I've seen
We're
some people
one.
come in, but
Yes, we're one
no
less.
executive board.
One more had come in, we wouldn't be having this.
We would sit in case.
Can any of them vote electronically or over the phone?
No, we don't have that.
Can they,
Redevelopment Commission's got
can
it.
they appoint someone over the phone?
No.
Okay.
You have to physically.
A couple of good ideas, but the answer is no.
Redevelopment Commission's actually joined the 21st century with statute in some of the state bodies, but we're
It
not.
has to have a specific
Yeah,
statute.
and we're not there.
And for instance, the Regional Development Authority did get that authority.
Yes, it is. So,
If you,
What is the pleasure of the body?
Mr. Chair, if you do proceed, may I recommend that because of the numbers involved, that we do a roll call vote of the executive board to clarify, to make sure that we don't go on a voice vote.
Fair enough. With no objection, the chair is happy to move that way and not make us have a majority vote to decide to have a roll call vote. It's what can happen in Roberts, as a matter of fact. Madam Chair of that
Yes.
committee, are all of these of equal import, do you believe, in terms of timeliness, or is there any one of these that you think you should recommend that we take steps on today? The
Well,
important one is the one I heard.
Yes.
and the watershed initiative too.
So that's the one you just read, correct?
So both of these on the procurement recommendations. But I also think that, well, let me ask, will they be able to continue the feasibility work in Hobart without us acting on it today? So it's really the procurement recommendations.
Okay, so then the other two matters, we can just take as information, and those can be held over to the next meeting. All right, and I thank you for your report. And this comes from the Finance and Personnel Care, a favorable recommendation for consideration. All right, the chair reminds you that this would be a matter to authorize subject to ratification. The chair will receive a motion if there is willingness among the members of the executive committee without a quorum, if they wish to make a motion to authorize the procurement recommendations subject to ratification at a future date.
So moved.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to authorize forward motion on the procurement recommendations subject to future ratification. The member who made the motion wishes to speak in favor of the motion. Does the member any opposition wish to speak in opposition to the motion? Believing that there's no need for further debate, Chair will entertain a roll call vote. Ms. Thorne, if you would roll call.
And this is the executive board?
Yes, of the executive board alone.
Okay, the executive board. Sorry. Jeff Benson?
Yes.
Okay, Mayor Copeland? Karen Freeman Wilson?
Yes?
Michael Griffin?
Yes.
Justin Kyle?
Yes.
Tom McDermott? Blair Milo? Diane Knoll? Ed Soliday? Greg Stinson? Jim Tuck?
Yes.
So there's 5 yes, and the others is absent.
And I thank the members for that. And then we'll just take up the rest of your report if that's acceptable at the next meeting of the executive committee. And we should basically keep the other matter on the agenda and identify this matter that requires ratification. Thank you very much. Now, we'll recognize the environmental committee chair, Mr. Benson.
Great, thank you. The minutes from our December meeting are on pages 14 to 15. And in February, we had a presentation from the EPA regarding what's going on in East Chicago with the lead. And two issues there. One is the Superfund cleanup, and the other is the removal from the dirt. And the other was briefly touched on the water and the importance of water filters for everybody. And you're right as close to where you drink it as possible. And since then, there's been some very good movement that way. Governor Holcomb has declared it a state of emergency, and there's been some very forward motion, which is wonderful. Helping East Chicago and other communities is what MCD is about. It's a regional problem, and so we are proud and happy to help with that, whatever help we need. And in April, we're scheduled to have a presentation on lead in the water by the EPA and filters. And in March, which is the first Thursday of each month at 9 a.m. in this room, we will have the new head of IDA presenting. So you're all welcome. Did I miss anything, Kathy?
Any questions of the commissioner?
My report.
Thank you very much for your report. I've been asked to report on the Technical Planning Committee for the action it took recently. They did meet on Valentine's Day, the 14th of February. The Venerable Kathy Luther, the staff, the environmental member of staff who talked about thriving economy goals and how they were aligned with the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and they talked about the objectives and those goals and how they relate to the overall vision of that plan to make us have a vibrant region. Also, there was a presentation from NRPC's Joe Exel, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, regarding the Deep River Portage Burns Harbor Waterway Initiative, and essentially that involves a cost-sharing program to remedy non-point pollutants that go into the Deep River. And if you're interested in more about that, the NRPC website has more for you. Also, the most venerable David Wright, the Gary Public Transportation Corporation, presented a video on Saturday, I missed that actually, that will be uploaded to YouTube with a discussion with regard to the benefits of transit generally, and having a transit system in place. We thank you for that. And in other news, NRPC's Mitch Barloga updated the committee on the status of the Greenways and Blueways 2020 plan, and it is slated for final adoption by the full commission, I believe, pursuant to a formal recommendation from the TBC in June. Also, there is a matter for consideration today, and I again will ask, is this a time-sensitive matter for the TBC, or is this a matter that can wait for the forum to take place? Can it wait? All right, I thank you. This has to do with an amendment to the Transportation Improvement Plan. If it's not time-sensitive, I appreciate the leave of the commission not to move forward with the committee. I will remind you again that the TBC committee will be meeting once again on Tuesday, March 14th, also at 9 o'clock, also here in the Lake Michigan room. And I believe that concludes the report from the TBC. Blair Milo, our colleague and commissioner and mayor of LaPorte, is here today as chair of the legislative committee. Is there another member of that committee who wants to give a report about anything under its purview?
Well, I can say that they haven't met since the initial meeting, correct. So there's been no further dialogue on that. If I could take the liberty, I'd just say a quick word about House Bill 1002, the road funding bill. And the MPOs have been looking very carefully at that. Obviously, it's a way to obtain revenue. I won't go into the details because I think you're all well versed on what the issues are with that bill. I just will say, I feel like I would be remiss to not say that the MPOs themselves have been talking about the nuances of an exchange provision at the end of that bill, and still some uncertainty about whether that language really accomplishes what the intention of that language is, which is a state-federal funding swap. And I don't need to go into details unless you'd like me to. But
Is everybody aware of that swap that's being discussed? There's a number of organizations. AIM, formerly IAC, is very involved in this, and they favor the language. The idea is that one of the core competencies of INDOT is to deal with the paperwork associated with the federal funding requirements from the highway plan. So one of the thoughts is that maybe they could basically keep most of that money instead of divvying it out historically as they have. And then in exchange for that, there's supposed to be a dollar for dollar difference. So what we would be getting would be pure state money, and that would allow us to expedite things because it wouldn't have attached to it some of the paperwork, but also none of the environmental study requirements and some of those federal requirements. And some of us in AIM were nervous about some of that, but there's a pretty significant amount of steam behind getting that done because a lot of mayors feel like we haven't had an adequate amount of support for financing infrastructure that we believe has been laying fallow. So the idea is to move that forward. The role of the MPOs in that is still being worked out. Their role essentially emerges when federal funds are involved for the scoring and the allocation. There was some talk, some early iterations of the bill would keep them doing that same function except for state monies. It's not clear how that's going to work out. That may be why the MPOs are watching closely.
I could summarize, if I could summarize it very succinctly, actually. The concerns of the MPOs are not, and again, we meet on a regular basis. There's an Indiana MPO Council, of which we participate in, meets at INDOT once a month. It's been hugely helpful, and frankly, I've never seen anything else like it in the state, and even in the country. No other state that I'm aware of has that tight of a coordination between INDOT and the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, and each other, all 14 MPOs. So we meet on a regular basis. And I think I can summarize the MPO position on this is just more of making sure that the communities aren't actually harmed or things aren't actually made worse by the legislation versus actually benefiting from it. And here's the essential need of it, two things. One, again, none of the MPOs are trying to be obstructionist in the bill itself. If we can expedite projects, everyone's in favor of trying to make it easier for communities, so that is not the issue. The issue is there's some question of whether it really will accomplish what it says to be. I've seen one fact sheet on this that claims a 20% reduction in costs, but there's been no real demonstration of how that's actually saved. No particular demonstration that the rules will necessarily, of what rules you can actually bypass from federal requirements. There are plenty I know that you will still have to do regardless. So the question is will there really be the savings touted? But then again, we could try it and see if it actually helps things. I think the main concern at this point with the language is it's very subtle, but the MPOs want to make sure the language maintains the flexibility for funding that we currently have with federal funds. In other words, if in that swap, and our read of the language, not an attorney, not pretending to be one, but our read of the language is not clear that you can still use those funds for the range of projects like trails, roundabouts, some of the things we've been doing for a long time that the communities wants, versus strictly road improvement projects. And the concern is making sure that the communities have as much flexibility as they've had prior. Again, not to say it won't be there, not to say it can't be fixed, but I'm just saying as the language as it is right now, it's not clear that that flexibility is possible.
And it doesn't relieve the state of Indiana from the MPO. The MPOs will still be doing the work that they have to do over their projects that are in the jurisdiction of the particular MPO. So we'll be busy on that, but if this goes through, in the beginning at least, a lot of the considerations for federal money will be dealing with state bodies that are dealing with it as opposed to locals. But we'll keep you posted. We'll see how it goes. If there's nothing else, then I'm going to move and recognize Rick Powers, who is our LaPorte District Deputy Commissioner from INDOT. And welcome, Rick. Please edify us.
Thank you. Actually, I was talking to Mary before the meeting started about the digression of my voice that I've talked to all of you about before in my 21 years in the Marine Corps. And I have like a range, low and then scream. Scream sounds angry, you know, and most often it's like, why are you mad? I'm like, I'm mad, I can't communicate. They're like, you're not doing a good job. So forgive me again, that's why Mary put me here apparently, but I don't have many friends. Thanks, Mary. Something else I learned in the Marine Corps, actually to the point of Mr. Benson said earlier about false information. You know, oftentimes when we outline false information, especially in writing, the response is invariably someone is clarifying a point. So as, going back to my Marine Corps profession, I was never the commanding general, but I sat outside their door often, meaning I was pretty close to them. And I had one in particular who used to say to me, speak when you can do something about the problem. If not, shut up. We had a lot of quiet meetings. But quite frankly, there was no solution. And if there wasn't one, why speak about it? Right? We're just going to exacerbate the condition. So I guess I'll leave you to ponder that based on what you're proposing to do, and maybe look at the history before you release it, and maybe dig a little deeper into that history. Because I've been forced to since the last meeting. And I wouldn't leave any hanging chads, if you will, or whatever you want to call them, in that point of outlining the condition. Does that make sense? And again, I don't want to dive deep into this and go any further, but again, the voices that I hear here, I hope you've seen the local side of me, the kid that came out of the city, that came out of the Marine Corps, that wants to say yes to your very point, and what we're trying to do legislatively, remove barriers. You know, but again, understanding our good intentions can cause problems that we don't foresee. So again, let's do due diligence in all things. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say to all of us now, is I hope you've seen that as you speak to me as a representative in INDOT, and of course, by extension, the governor, that if you ask me to do something and I can, I will. If I have to say no, it's because I have to say no. It's not, I'm put in a position that I desire us to do it. I'm not even wired that way. I've been serving the people since I was a teenager. And it's not one of bureaucracy, it's one of servanthood. So I just want you to know that as you're bringing me these problems, that's the way I address them. And if, and hopefully, again, back to the point of not saying much, I hope my actions speak far louder than what I'm trying to say now with a very soft voice and not yell at you. That being said, I'll give you an update on where we are. Unfortunately, and I hope it never comes to the point that you might teach the final lesson, the wire thief is back. We caught the second party. It was a different party. But for some reason, there is no sense of fear as to what can take place if you make contact with that wire at the wrong time. And I don't want to see that. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what I fear worse, is that we're going to be reading a story about a wire thief lying next to the pole that they're attempting to take the wire from, because it is energized and it is very dangerous, but yet it's not deterring, for whatever reason, the intent of the ne'er-do-well, if you will. So we have a third party, and we had a theft, take place between Klein and Kennedy on 8094, and 8094 seems to be an area where they like to operate. So again, we are working with the locals, working with ISP, we're working with the salvage yards, we're working with anyone to come up with an idea as to how to, one, catch them. Hopefully we will, we caught the last two, but again, to stop it would be the better idea, and I've got our engineering group working on some anti-tamper devices and so on, but again, those all come at a cost. As we know, anything we build special usually has gold plating on it, or it seems to. It just costs more to install. So we're trying, okay? I just want you to know that, well, not only say we're trying, we're moving. It's just finding the money to actually do it. The other good news is our salt barns are relatively full, and we're doing fairly well with winter operations to that point. As to what we're doing in the winter has done well to that. But being in northern Indiana, knowing the water tables and the freeze thaw, frost heave, State Road 14 basically disintegrated in over a 7-mile stretch because of frost heave. I mean, just we had a freeze thaw cycles that have been relatively rough this winter, believe it or not. With a mild winter, pavement doesn't do as well as you would think in the northern region because of the water table freeze thaw. You get this rise and fall, if you will, of the pavement, and it begins to deteriorate. In fact, John showed it up, probably can give you the scientific side of this if you want to. But this is what I wanted to say, getting back to the positive side of this. We had a 7-mile stretch of State Road 14 closed because it just disintegrated, just that quickly. But a phone call to industry, which is where I really wanted to bring up. The weather being what it is, for whatever reason, went above 40 degrees, and I was able to call someone from industry because we knew there was a hot mix plant in the vicinity of that area, but it's closed, like they're all closed. And we thought we were gonna have to put stone in there, and then once snow, and our plows are gonna blow all that out on the side of the road, and we're gonna be back all winter till spring, and then cleaning up the stone. Well, we had a partner in industry, and I'm not gonna call them out because we have a lot of great partners in industry. And I called them and they said, tell me now and I'll warm the plant over the weekend because the temperature's going over 40 Monday. How much do you want? And did it. And we were able to make repairs with hot mix asphalt and make a longer term repair and get us through to next year, maybe even move a program and program the project forward to get a longer term fix. So again, a positive side of this of us trying to remove the barriers, if you will, of everything from contract to what constitutes emergency to moving, to getting things done. And this party never asked me for anything other than they saw the problem the same way I saw it and was willing to call staff in and open it. The invoice is paid and we moved on. I like when those things happen. So I wanted to share that it was bad news because we also believe we have other roads that are close. If this continues, this freeze thaw, that we may have to do this again. It's going to be warm this weekend if it does, so hopefully we'll call it. I don't want to see it happen again. So that happened. The paint, again, another point I tried to do is follow up from things I heard from the previous meeting. I believe Mr. Nowicki, who isn't here, brought up his walk and the paint condition we noted. We drove the roads, and again, it is what we are finding is in the area of rumble strips, as they depress, below, I guess what you would call finished grade, the paint is also below finished grade. Hence the visibility goes below visibility. And the beads and some of the things that take place are that we use in the paints, of course, if you don't have light on it, it's not reflecting light. So hence you have the issue of, I guess, duality, trying to figure out in one sense, creating a safety feature with the rumble strips that I believe, again, are saving lives. And the paint, of course, if you're visually perceptive, also saves lives. But therein lies the issue. And as John had said before, if we have enough pavement width, we try to put the paint beside the rumble strip, which will help, and we'll continue to do that. But I was actually in Indy yesterday at a presentation where there's a new design that they're proposing. John, do you know the wave, what is it called?
I have not seen that yet. I've heard it's coming.
Okay, so there is a design basically that our friends at Purdue are looking at relative to rumble strip design. It's not a more as abrupt of a break, if you will, and the pavement is more of a wave.
Not a washboard.
Not yet, exactly. It provides the same effect. In other words, you're going to feel it, but not as abrupt. It's more of a gradual curve, which again should provide for the visualization of painting. So I don't want to give an engineering lesson, and John can if you want to know how it's going. I know Mr. Wicke had an interest and saw it. It's true. And we're trying to address it in that way through innovation and re-engineering what we can do with it. I think beyond that, I think that was it. Oh, in the area on State Road 41, in case you're wondering where it was between State Road 55 and 41 down around Morocco, Fair Oaks, that area. So that's all I have, unless you all have questions for me. Thanks for your time.
Please, Jeff.
Two things. One is I just started laughing when you were talking about the anti-theft device, which you would have, assumed that the electricity would be a great one.
Yes, that's exactly what I was alluding to.
But the other was, thank you for your great efforts on keeping the snow off the roads this winter.
We're nailing it this year.
It's really good. I have to say.
You get blamed for everything else.
Usually.
Deputy Commissioner, we always appreciate that you're here. We appreciate the value you bring, the value that you have. And thank you for your report. We look forward to you continuing to report to us. Thank you very much. Is there any other business to come before this body? We don't have any public comment to receive today. Pursuant to our public participation policy, it does require sign-in by persons interested to speak before us, and no one signed in. And are there any announcements from staff or leadership?
In Bob Hardigan's absence, I'm sure there's something
Sign.
going on.
Look up what's going on in Cedar Lake on its website, because surely there's something going on we're missing in this session.
Just for the sake of saying something, NICD has free rides westbound for until the next couple of days as they build it for Valentine's Day. It's loving their passengers. You still have to pay to come back.
There's a catch in that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to thank the Environmental Committee for addressing the concerns of the citizens of East Chicago and the Superfund Fund. Appreciate it.
I'm actually going to send a little note to the governor, because I thought that his action to take that step was helpful. And I wanted to know that I'm not in that city, but you're my neighbor. And I wanted to know that we appreciated that step. We thought that mattered. We thought that was a very positive step. So I'll get a little note for me, just for me. But hopefully that will be an encouragement that we appreciate that he thought of us that way. Because he's our governor too.
Yes, it is.
Is there-
Commendable act.
Yeah, I agree. It's highly commendable. Nothing else? All right, there being no further matters on our agenda, please stand adjourned. Thank you all again for coming. Members of the council,